What's going on, everyone? This is Lior with Compass out of Boston, and in this video, we're going to talk about the cost of living in Cambridge and Somerville. So let's get at it. What's going on, everyone? My name's Lior, and I'm with Compass out of Boston. And in this video, we're going to talk about the cost of living in Cambridge and Somerville. And what we're going to specifically talk about is the cost of living in terms of housing, taxes, utilities, and then food and groceries. Now, before we get into the content, two quick things. Number one, if you guys haven't already subscribed to my channel, smash that subscribe button because I put out tons of new videos every single week, all about what it's like to live in Boston, moving to Boston, the different neighborhoods, tips on buying and investing, etc. So if you haven't already subscribed to my channel, smash that subscribe button. And number two, if you guys are even thinking about doing anything with real estate, whether it's buying, selling, investing, or whatever else it may be, shoot me an email, send me a text, shoot me a call, DM me on Instagram, right? I get so many reach outs from you guys watching my videos, asking me about advice from all across the real estate spectrum. So and I absolutely love it. So if you guys have any questions, hit me up and I will take care of you. So let's get into today's content. And we're going to start by talking about housing in Cambridge and Somerville. And let me say this right off the bat. Cambridge and Somerville are expensive real estate markets, right? Besides the core downtown, right? So areas like the Back Bay, South End, Fenway, even like Charlestown, right? Besides that, Cambridge and Somerville are one of the more expensive markets around the Boston area. They're obviously super, super desirable because of their location, their convenience, all the amenities they offer. So these are going to be some pretty high prices. So let's get a little bit more detailed, right? So for Cambridge, the lowest price condo you can probably find is going to be starting in the mid 400s. That will be enough to probably get you a very small studio or maybe a small one bedroom. But it's rare to see anything below mid 400s. Now, if you're going to start to look at maybe two bed condos, right? Maybe somewhere around 800 to 1,000 square feet or so. In that case, you're probably going to be looking in the high sixes, sevens. There's obviously a lot of variance with this. And what I mean by sixes and sevens, I mean 600,000, 700. There's obviously going to be a lot of variance, right? Because it's going to depend tremendously on the exact location within Cambridge, right? Certain neighborhoods are much more expensive than others. Also, the condition of the property, right? Obviously, if it's a property that needs a ton of work, it's going to be a lot cheaper, whereas turnkey or new construction is going to be much more expensive. But in general, it is possible to start looking around that 600 to 700 range and find those, two bed that are around 800 to 1,000 square feet. Now, Somerville's close, but it is a little bit cheaper. So for Somerville, the lowest price condo, you're probably going to be low 400s. That's kind of where you're going to typically start. And then for larger units, again, when you start getting into the 800 to 1,000 square foot range, and if you're going to be looking for two bedrooms, you're going to start to be around the low 600s where you can start seeing product come out on that, right? So obviously it can go much higher depending, again, on the exact location, right? I mean, Somerville definitely has a pretty big discrepancy in different neighborhoods, as well as the condition. Again, like we talked about, turnkey, new construction versus something that needs work is going to be priced completely different. But again, in general, you can start looking around in the low 600s. You're going to start to find that kind of product, 800 to 1,000 square feet. So again, a little bit cheaper than Cambridge. Now, if you're going to be looking at maybe something like, say, multifamilies, right? Let's say you're looking to buy a two-family, whether it's an investment property or maybe you're going to live in one unit and rent out the other. In terms of two-family, Somerville starts usually in the 900s. And for the 900s, you're typically going to have a smaller building. Maybe two bed or one bed units in each of the units. You're probably going to have some work to do, right? It's probably not going to be super updated, but it's possible to find deals of two families in the 900s. And obviously it can go much, much more expensive, again, depending on size, condition, location. Cambridge is, you're more than likely going to be breaking 1 million for a two-family. Yes, it's a really expensive market. You know, it's pretty hard to find anything under $1 million. And even at $1 million or so, you're likely going to be looking at smaller buildings and buildings that are going to need some sort of updating, typically kitchens, baths, that kind of stuff. All right, so let's go into factor number 2, which is taxes. And I think this one's going to shock you just a little bit. So before we get into Somerville and Cambridge's tax rate, let's first set the bar with Boston, right? And the way for the year 2020, Boston's tax rate is $10.56 for every $1,000 of value. So basically all that means, let's say you're buying $1 million, you know, the way you would do the math is say you're buying $1 million property, you would divide $1 million divided by 1,000, right? And then you would just multiply 1056 by that number, right? So for every $1,000 of assessed value, you are paying $10.56 in taxes. Now Somerville's tax rate is actually just a little bit higher. It is $10.76 for every $1,000 of assessed value for the year 2020. Now, finally, for Cambridge, now don't fall off your seats quite yet, but for Cambridge, for the year 2020, the tax assessment rate is actually $5.75 for every $1,000 of value. Yes, it is way below both Boston and Somerville. Cambridge is known to have just incredibly low residential tax rate. You know, I mean, it's almost half, right? It's kind of crazy when you think about it. So when you're making strategic decisions financially, right, that might be one thing you want to consider, right? Because the amount of taxes you're going to save on in a place like Cambridge versus even neighboring Somerville is a good amount of money. I mean, it could be almost 50% of your tax rate, which could be, again, it's significant numbers when you're talking about pretty high prices. You know, so that does make Cambridge, you know, that should kind of go into your equation. Again, if you're thinking about it financially, obviously there are a lot of other things you got to account for, general real estate prices, specific location that you want to live in. But again, that is certainly one of the things I would consider, because Cambridge just has that incredibly low residential tax rate. It is one of the lowest around the greater Boston area. It's actually one of the lowest across the state. So just something really, really for you guys to consider when you're making those decisions. All right, so now let's go to factor number 3, which is utilities. And for utilities, I'd say it's not so much different in Cambridge and Somerville compared to the rest of Boston. If you saw my cost of living in Boston video, you probably got a pretty good sense. And I'd say it's pretty similar in Cambridge and Somerville. So just to recap that, you know, average gas and electric bill, you're probably looking somewhere around $150 per month, plus minus. Again, obviously, if you get a massive house, it's going to be completely different versus a studio. But in general, that's probably a pretty good ballpark. I'd say you're generally going to have around maybe a $50 electric bill per month, and then your gas bill is going to be $100. In the winter, though, when it gets super, super cold, and you really have to crank out your gas heat, you know, that bill can certainly creep up to $150 or so. But again, as a rule of thumb, those are kind of the numbers here. Also, as a reminder, water and sewer are typically, if you're renting, are paid by the landlord, right? So most buildings around here do not sub-meter water. That is, I'd say, pretty rare unless you're living in a very large or brand new complex. And then if you're going to be owner occupying, let's say you're living in a condo association, that's typically the water and sewer bill is typically coming out of your condo bill. So it's not something that you would directly pay for yourself. Now, if you're going to buy a multifamily, that's a different story. Then you will be responsible for that water and sewer bill. And number 4 is groceries and food. And again, I'd say Cambridge and Somerville are not too far from what the rest of Boston is, but because Cambridge and Somerville are pretty pricey neighborhoods, as you can kind of tell, I think they're kind of concentrated in terms of just how many pricey options they have. So if you don't remember from my previous video, I said that there's a national statistic that average food budget should be about $325 per month. I'd say around the Boston area, and definitely Cambridge and Somerville, it should probably be closer to $450 to $500 a month, especially since both of those areas have pretty expensive grocery stores, right? I mean, a lot of people really like to do their shopping in Whole Foods in Cambridge and Somerville. And Whole Foods is obviously much, much more expensive than your typical store. Even, there's a couple of Star Markets. Again, Star Markets tend to be more expensive. There is one Market Basket, which is in Somerville. There you can get really, really cheap groceries. Actually, some of the cheapest, even compared to across the country, it's super cheap. So if you're going to be doing bundle shopping, that's definitely one good way to save some money. But again, besides that, a lot of people do shop in the more expensive grocery stores. So definitely make sure you allocate for that in your food budget. Now, in terms of going out to eat, I'd say, again, pretty similar, where if you're going to be getting lunch, you typically can expect to spend somewhere in the vicinity of $10 to $15. If you're going to go to a nicer restaurant, which Cambridge and Somerville have plenty of, it's certainly going to be pricier, right? Your average for two people, of course, your average two people meal can run you anywhere from $60 to $100, depending if you get dessert, drinks, right? If you get drinks at a nice restaurant or a bar, those can easily be $10 to $12 a pop. So, it's definitely pricier in Cambridge and Somerville. Again, the neighborhoods are obviously really nice, and with that usually comes more expensive lifestyle. So hopefully that helps, guys. If you guys are thinking of making the move into Cambridge, Somerville, and you don't know too much about it, like I said in the intro, guys, I get so many calls from you guys asking what it's like to live here, the different neighborhoods to explore, how to buy, how to sell, how to invest, etc. So if you have any questions, just hit me up and I will take care of you. If you guys have any comments, thoughts, or anything like that, throw them in the comments below. And otherwise, I'll see you next time.